Chief Obinna Nwosu did not leave 5 million on the solid Iroko wood table in his main living room by accident. No, my dear friend, a man like Chief Obinna, who had built a sprawling property development conglomerate from nothing, did not make mistakes with his money. Those stacks of Naira notes, bound with elastic bands and scattered with calculated carelessness among old magazines and pending utility bills, were not a mistake. They were a trap, a brutal, cold, and ruthless test he applied to anyone who dared cross the threshold of his mansion to work. And until that day, no one, absolutely no one, had resisted. Drivers, house helps, gardeners. Sooner or later, greed won the battle. A quick hand, a note slipped into a pocket, the internal justification that the old man had too much money anyway. Chief Obinna had seen it all, from the shadows of his study, with a bitter smile on his lips, confirming again and again his darkest theory, that everyone, without exception, has a price. But before I tell you what happened that day, and how a little girl was about to challenge all the laws of that bitter man, I heartily invite you to subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell, and please leave me a comment below telling me from which city or country you are listening to us today. I love reading your comments and knowing how far our stories of faith and hope reach. Your support is what allows us to continue bringing these soul-touching tales. Now let's return to the Nwosu mansion. Chief Obinna was 55 years old, but his gaze carried the weight of a century of disappointments. He lived alone in that immense house, surrounded by luxuries that no longer gave him pleasure, but served as armor. Its polished granite walls and heavy mahogany doors were not there to impress visitors, but to keep the world at bay. He had become a reclusive man, convinced that anyone who approached him sought only one thing: his fortune. His own family had betrayed him in the past. His ex-wives had taken large chunks of his estate, and his supposed friends had disappeared as soon as he turned off the tap of loans they never repaid. This one will be just like the others, Chief Obinna muttered to himself, adjusting the security camera focus on his monitor screen. He sat in his office with the blinds drawn, observing the crisp image of the living room. There was the money, 5 million inches cash, an amount that could change anyone's life, thrown about as if it were trash. For Chief Obinna, that money was just paper, but he knew that for the woman about to enter, it represented the difference between eating or going hungry, between having a roof over her head or sleeping on the street. And he counted on that desperation. He wanted her to steal. Deep in his hardened heart, Chief Obinna wished she would fail the test so he could tell himself once more, "See, I was right. No one can be trusted." The mansion's doorbell resonated, a deep, grave sound that seemed to vibrate the cold air of the house. On the other side of the immense carved wooden door, Ngozi waited. Ngozi was 30 years old, but life's hardships had etched lines of worry on her face that made her look older. She wore a simple dress, clean and carefully ironed, but worn from years of use and washing. Her shoes, although polished that morning, had thin soles from so much walking, seeking opportunities that were denied to her again and again. But Ngozi was not alone. Clinging to her hand, her knuckles white from gripping so tightly, was Amara, her 7-year-old daughter, a girl with big, observant eyes, her hair tied in 2 perfect braids, and a school uniform that was a little short in the sleeves. Ngozi was trembling. She needed that job. God knew how much she needed it. Her husband, Emeka, had died 2 years ago in a construction accident, leaving them with nothing, only debts and immense grief. Since then, Ngozi had cleaned floors, washed other people's clothes, and cared for the elderly, but the debts kept growing. And the rent for her small room in a crowded Lagos suburb was 3 months overdue. If she didn't get this live-in job at Chief Obinna's mansion, by the end of the week, they would be on the street. The door opened automatically with an electric hum. "Come in," a voice boomed through the intercom. It was dry, authoritative. Ngozi took a deep breath, quietly whispered a prayer, and looked at her daughter. "Remember what I told you, my love," Ngozi whispered, bending down to Amara's eye level. "You sit quietly, do your homework. Don't touch anything. This Baba is very strict, and he's doing us a huge favor by letting you come. Understood?" "Yes, Mama." "I won't touch anything," Amara replied in a sweet voice, hugging her mended backpack like a shield. They entered. The mansion's foyer was so large that their small room would fit in it twice over. The floor shone so brightly it looked like a pool of water. Amara looked at everything with fascination, but also with fear. Everything there screamed money, power, and do not touch. Chief Obinna emerged from his study to greet them. He did not shake their hands. He stood at the top of the staircase, looking at them with disdain. like a king surveying his poorest subjects. His gaze lingered on the child with annoyance. "I told you on the phone. I don't like children, Mrs. Ngozi," Chief Obinna said without greeting. "They make noise, break things, and make messes." "I know, Chief Obinna, and I apologize profusely," Ngozi hastened to say, her voice trembling but dignified. "But I have no one to leave her with after school. I promise you won't even notice her presence. She is very well behaved, very studious, and I will work twice as hard to compensate. Please, sir, we need this job." Chief Obinna descended the stairs slowly, savoring the power he held over this woman. He stopped in front of them. He could smell fear in Ngozi, but he also noticed something else. A silent dignity. That annoyed him. He preferred people who groveled or who were brazen. Dignity and poverty seemed like a lie to him. "All right," he said coldly. "But at the first complaint, the first noise, or the first object out of place, both of you will be out on the street. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Don't thank me yet. Start with the living room. It's a mess. There are papers and things I left last night from working. Tidy everything up. Dust and vacuum the rugs. I will be in my study. I do not want to be disturbed." Chief Obinna pointed towards the large double doors of the main living room. He knew exactly what was behind those doors. He knew that temptation was served on a silver platter. "And you, child," Chief Obinna said, directing his stern gaze towards Amara. "Sit in a corner and don't move." Amara nodded, intimidated, and hid a little more behind her mother's leg. Ngozi and Amara walked towards the living room. Ngozi pushed the heavy doors open and entered. The room was majestic, with large windows overlooking an immaculate garden. But in the center, on the coffee table, chaos reigned. Magazines, open folders, expensive pens, and money, lots of money. Ngozi swallowed hard. She had never seen so many banknotes together in her life, but her survival instinct and her values were quicker. "Amara, sit on that corner sofa, take out your notebooks, and start studying. Mama is going to get the cleaning supplies from the kitchen. I'll be back in a minute. Don't get up." Ngozi hurried towards the kitchen, wanting to start as soon as possible to prove her worth, leaving little Amara alone in that immense room, with the heavy silence of the mansion and 5 million looking at her from the table. In his study, Chief Obinna settled into his leather chair, laced his fingers, and fixed his gaze on the screen. The show was about to begin. The mother had gone, the child was alone, the trap was open, and the prey was inside. "Let's see what you're made of, child of necessity," Chief Obinna whispered, his eyes fixed on the little girl who timidly began to lift her gaze from her backpack towards the forbidden table. While Ngozi searched for the bucket and mop in the cupboards of that immense, cold kitchen, her hands trembled slightly. It wasn't just the fear of Chief Obinna and his volcanic temper. It was the weight of a promise she carried on her shoulders. A promise made amidst tears and the antiseptic smell of a government hospital 2 years ago. Ngozi's life hadn't always been grey. There was a time when, though humble, the days had color. Her husband, Emeka, was a bricklayer with big hands and an easy smile. They had no luxuries, living hand to mouth, but in their small home, love and Amara's laughter were never missing. Emeka would come home from work covered in cement dust, and the first thing he would do, even before washing, was lift his little genius into the air. Because Amara, from a very young age, proved to be different. While other girls played with dolls, Amara counted. She counted the steps, counted the beans before her mother put them in the pot, added the numbers on the license plates of passing cars. "This child is going to be someone important, Ngozi," Emeka would say proudly, watching her solve sums in her head that he could barely do with paper and pencil. "She won't carry bricks like me. She'll build the buildings. But fate sometimes has cruel plans that we cannot comprehend." One rainy morning, an unsecured scaffolding at the construction site gave way. The fall was fatal. Ngozi arrived at the hospital just in time to see the light fade from her life partner's eyes. "Promise me," Emeka whispered with his last breath, squeezing Ngozi's hand with the little strength he had left. "Promise me she will study, that she will never lack schooling. Don't let her mind get lost in poverty, Ngozi. Do what you have to do, but let Amara have a future. I promise you, my love. I swear it on my life," she sobbed. From that day, Ngozi lived only to fulfill that promise. She sold the few good pieces of furniture they had. She moved to a one-room apartment in a crowded Lagos suburb where rents were cheap and took any honest job that came along. She cleaned public toilets, scrubbed dishes in restaurants until her hands cracked and bled, cared for the sick at night. All to pay for Amara's second-hand books, her uniform, and to ensure she never went to school on an empty stomach, even if Ngozi had to have only a glass of water for dinner. Poverty hurts, my friends, but it hurts more when you see a child's potential wasted for lack of opportunity. Amara was brilliant. Her teachers said so. But what good was being brilliant if they didn't even have money for new pencils? Amara did her homework with pencil stubs she found discarded at school and used the back of old invoices to practice her multiplications. That morning, before arriving at Chief Obinna's mansion, Ngozi had opened the refrigerator. There was only half a bottle of milk and a piece of stale bread. That was the reality. If Chief Obinna fired her, the promise to Emeka would be broken. There would be no school, no future, only the streets and hunger. In the mansion's kitchen, Ngozi wiped away a treacherous tear rolling down her cheek. Don't cry, she told herself firmly. Emeka is watching you. Be strong for Amara. She grabbed the cleaning products with determination. She didn't know that across the hallway, in the living room, her little daughter was about to face a test that had nothing to do with cleaning, but with the very essence of who they were. Amara, sitting on the edge of the velvet sofa, looked at the table. For a girl who loved the logical order of numbers, what she saw before her was an aberration. She didn't see 5 million as a treasure to spend. She saw disorder. She saw chaos. Her structured, analytical mind could not bear to see things out of place. The banknotes were mixed up, some face up, others folded, confused among crumpled papers. For Amara, the world was a confusing and sometimes terrifying place since Papa Lemdiant. Numbers were her refuge because numbers never lied, never changed, and always had a solution if you thought hard enough. And that table was a math problem that needed to be solved, without knowing that she was being observed by a hidden camera, and without knowing that her mother's future depended on her next moves. The girl put her backpack on the floor. Her small, worn shoes touched the ornate rug. She approached the table, not with a thief's greed, but with a scientist's curiosity about to fix something broken. The silence in Chief Obinna Nvosu's mansion was not peace. It was a warning. It was that heavy kind of silence felt in museums or mausoleums, where it seems that even breathing loudly is an offense. As Ngozi began to clean the kitchen tiles, with an energy born of panic, she felt that oppressive atmosphere trying to suffocate her. Every corner of that house screamed loneliness, but it also screamed, "You don't belong here." Ngozi scrubbed the polished marble countertop until her arms ached. She couldn't afford a single mistake. She knew Chief Obinna was a man who looked for the slightest excuse to fire her. She had seen that look before in other wealthy employers, that mix of contempt and suspicion, as if being poor were a contagious disease or proof of a lack of character. But Ngozi had her dignity intact. Her shoes might be broken, but her work ethic was ironclad. "Please God," she whispered as she rinsed the cloth. "Make her behave, make no noise, make her invisible." Meanwhile, in the dimness of his armored study, Chief Obinna did not take his eyes off the security monitors. The bluish light of the screens illuminated his face, further highlighting the wrinkles of bitterness around his mouth. There was the girl on screen number 4. Chief Obinna leaned forward in his leather chair, his eyes narrowed. Amara had gotten up from the sofa. "There she is," Chief Obinna muttered in a hoarse voice, speaking to the solitude of his office. "Curiosity killed the cat, child, and greed will kill your mother's job." For Chief Obinna, what was about to happen was a script he had seen 1,000 times. In his mind, poverty was synonymous with desperation, and desperation always led to theft. He had left those 5 million there, not as a gift, but as a guillotine. He expected to see the girl grab a wad, hide it in her school backpack or her pockets. He expected to see her run to the kitchen to give it to her mother, and then see the mother hide it in her underwear. It was a cynical vision, yes, but life had taught him to expect the worst, to avoid disappointment. If this story is already touching your heart, if you feel the anguish of this mother and the innocence of this child facing a world that judges them without knowing them, tell me in the comments if you have ever experienced something similar, if you ever felt unjustly judged. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss how this story ends, because I assure you, what's coming will surprise you. Let's return to screen number 4. Amara approached the coffee table with slow, silent steps. Her canvas sneakers barely made a sound on the ornate rug that cost more than the house they lived in. Chief Obinna held his breath. His finger was ready on the intercom button to scream thief, the exact moment the child's hand touched the money with the intention of taking it. The girl reached the edge of the table. She was so short that her chin barely cleared the top of the furniture. Her large, dark eyes scanned the mess. Chief Obinna saw her frown. It was not an expression of greed or astonishment at wealth. It was an expression of annoyance. Amara looked at the crumpled papers, looked at the uncapped pens, rolling dangerously close to the edge, and looked at the piles of green notes, thrown without any logic. For Amara's brilliant mind, that was painful. In her world, where every kobo counted, money was respected, cared for, and above all, numbers had to have an order. The chaos of that table offended her innate sense of mathematical logic. Chief Obinna saw the girl extend her small hand. "Do it," the millionaire whispered, tensing his jaw. "Take it. Confirm that I am right. Confirm that you are all the same." Amara's hand touched the first wad of 1,000 notes. Chief Obinna exhaled, feeling a sickening mixture of triumph and sadness. He had her. He could fire them now. He could be alone and safe again in his fortress of ice. But then the girl did something that was not in Chief Obinna's script, something that made the millionaire gasp and remain paralyzed in his chair, unable to understand what his eyes were seeing. Amara did not put the banknote in her pocket, nor did she look around with that furtive guilt of someone who knows they are doing something wrong. Instead, with a delicacy that contrasted with her small, cold, roughened hands, the girl smoothed the banknote on the table, ironing it with the palm of her hand, removing a crease in the corner, as if she were healing a wound. Chief Obinna, glued to the screen in his study, frowned. "What is she doing?" he thought, bewildered. "She's stacking them to take them all together. That's it." But Amara didn't stop there. She picked up another wad, and then another. With absolute concentration, the girl began to create ordered piles on the table. She separated the 1,000 notes to the right, the 500 notes to the left. The crumpled papers that were not money she set aside in a corner, classifying them as trash or documents, depending on whether they had important letters or not. She looked like a tiny bank teller. Her lips moved in silence, counting 1, 2, 3, 4. One could read it on her lips. Chief Obinna felt his mouth go dry. The girl was not stealing. The girl was working. She was bringing order to the chaos he had deliberately created. Then, Amara did something even more surprising. She opened her school backpack, the one with the half-broken zipper, and took out her math notebook and a chewed pencil. She opened a clean page, wrote something in large, round handwriting, recounted the banknotes, running her index finger over each one so as not to make a mistake. Suddenly, the girl stopped. Her small forehead creased with worry. She recounted the pile of 1,000 notes. She shook her head. Something wasn't right. Chief Obinna brought his face closer to the monitor, fascinated despite himself. "What's happening now?" he whispered. Amara got off the sofa and knelt on the rug. She began to look under the table, lifting magazines, looking under the armchair. Chief Obinna held his breath. "She's looking for more things to steal," his cynical mind thought for a second, but he was wrong. Amara stretched her little arm under the heavy leather sofa, and after a few seconds of effort, pulled out a crumpled D1000 note, covered in lint, that had rolled there, and that Chief Obinna didn't even remember losing. The girl's face lit up with a smile of pure satisfaction. She shook the note, blew off the dust, and triumphantly placed it on the corresponding pile. "Now it's correct," the girl whispered, though Chief Obinna couldn't hear her. Amara returned to her notebook, made a final sum, drew a double line below the result, and closed the notebook with a sharp thud. Then she gathered all the piles into a perfect stack, meticulously aligned with the edge of the table, and placed her notebook on top like a paperweight, crowning the work. She sat down again, crossed her hands in her lap, and sighed peacefully. The chaos had disappeared. The world, at least on that table, made logical sense again. In the study, the silence was absolute. Chief Obinna fell back into his chair stunned. His heart, which minutes earlier had pounded with the anticipation of catching a thief, now beat with a strange rhythm, a mixture of shame and amazement. For 15 years, no one had passed the test. No one. And now, a 7-year-old girl with worn shoes had not only not stolen a kobo, but had found lost money and organized it better than his own accountant. Chief Obinna slowly stood up, his legs heavy. He needed to see that with his own eyes. He needed to go downstairs and look at that notebook. He left the study and walked towards the living room, but this time his steps were not those of a hunter, but of a man who had just discovered that the map he had used all his life was wrong. Chief Obinna opened the double doors of the living room with a deliberate sharp bang. The sound resonated like thunder in the silence of the room. Amara gave a small jump on the sofa, pressing her pencil against her chest like a small defensive weapon. Her big eyes widened even further at the imposing figure of the homeowner advancing towards her. The millionaire walked slowly with his hands behind his back, scrutinizing the scene. The table, once a battleground of paper and naira, now looked like a Swiss bank display. The banknotes were aligned with surgical precision. "Who gave you permission to touch my table?" Chief Obinna asked. His voice was deep, but it no longer had that cutting steel edge from before. Now there was a vibrant, almost fearful curiosity hidden beneath the roughness. Amara bowed her head, ashamed. Her braids fell over her shoulders. "I'm sorry, sir," she whispered in a thread of a voice. "It was all mixed up. My mama says disorder brings bad luck." And the numbers were sad. Chief Obinna stopped dead. "The numbers were sad?" "Yes, they were mixed. 500 doesn't get along with 1,000 if they're not ordered. They get lost." Chief Obinna approached the table and picked up the school notebook that crowned the pile of money. It was a cheap notebook, with gray, rough pages, and its cover mended with adhesive tape. He opened it. There, in childish but firm handwriting, was the breakdown. Large green notes, 1,000, 450 units, 450,000. Medium green notes, 500. 100 units, 50,000. Total on the table, 495,000. Under the sofa, dirty, 1,000. Final sum, 500, zero exact. Chief Obinna felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't just a sum, it was a perfect audit done by a child who had probably never seen a 1,000 note in her mother's hand. He looked at Amara. The girl was trembling, waiting for a scolding, waiting to be sent away. "Do you like mathematics, Amara?" he asked, softening his tone for the first time in years. "Yes, sir. They are easy. Numbers never lie. People lie, but numbers don't. If you have 2 and you take away 1, there is always 1 left. It doesn't matter if you are rich or poor." That phrase hit Chief Obinna harder than any insult. People lie, numbers don't. "Let's see if that's true," Chief Obinna said, feeling a spark of challenge. "If I have 5 million and I invest it at 5% monthly, how much do I have at the end of the first month?" Amara frowned. She looked at the ceiling for a second, moving her lips quickly. 250,000 profit, sir. In total, 5,250,000. Chief Obinna blinked. It was fast. Too fast. For a 7-year-old. "And if I buy 12 houses at 4 million each?" 48 million, she replied instantly, like a spring. "And you have 2 million left from the 50 million on the table." Chief Obinna was breathless. He was in front of a prodigy, a rough diamond wrapped in a worn school uniform. At that moment, the kitchen door burst open. Ngozi rushed in, her face pale, wiping her hands on her apron. She had heard Chief Obinna's voice, and panic seized her. "Chief Obinna, I'm sorry," Ngozi cried, running towards her daughter. "Amara, I told you not to touch anything. Forgive me, sir. Please don't fire us. She is just a child. She doesn't know what she's doing. I swear if anything is missing, I will pay you back by working. But please." Ngozi hugged Amara, protecting her with her body, expecting the millionaire's fury, expecting dismissal. Chief Obinna looked at the terrified mother and the brilliant child. He looked at the perfectly ordered money. For the first time in a long time, the ice armor around his heart cracked. He realized he had been about to commit a terrible injustice, driven by his own bitterness. "Calm down, Ngozi," Chief Obinna said, raising a hand. "No one is going to be fired today." Ngozi stopped, tears in her eyes, confused. "No, but the money. Your daughter hasn't touched anything she shouldn't have." In fact, Chief Obinna paused and looked at Amara with a mixture of respect and something that could be called affection. "Your daughter has just taught me a lesson in order that not even my best accountants have achieved." Chief Obinna took a 1,000 note from the perfect pile. "Here, Amara, for your auditing work." Ngozi was about to protest, but Chief Obinna cut her off with a look. "It's not charity, Ngozi. It's payment for a professional service. This child has a gift, and it would be a sin against God to waste it." That day, something changed in the mansion. Chief Obinna did not become a saint overnight. He remained a difficult and reserved man, but he began to leave advanced math books, forgotten in the living room. He began to leave complex problems written on makeshift whiteboards, and Amara, always curious, solved them. A silent, secret bond formed between the lonely old chief and the little princess of numbers, a bond that would soon be tested by the true darkness approaching the house. They say that where there is much light, the shadows become darker. And in Chief Obinna's mansion, the small light that Amara had ignited with her innocence was about to attract the darkest and most dangerous shadow of all, family, or rather, what was left of it. Kunle was Chief Obinna's only nephew. He was 35 years old. He drove a red sports car his uncle had paid for, and wore Italian suits that cost more than Ngozi would earn in 5 years of hard work. But behind that facade of success and white smiles, Kunle was an empty man, a vulture patiently waiting for the beast to fall, to devour the remains. He had never worked a real day in his life. His businesses always failed, and they always ended with him in Chief Obinna's study, asking for another check to get him out of a jam. For Kunle, Chief Obinna was not an uncle. He was an ATM with an expiration date, and he had already done the math. The old man's fortune was immense, and having no children of his own, everything would go into his hands. It was his birthright. Or so he believed. That Tuesday afternoon, Kunle arrived at the mansion unannounced, as he usually did, to greet his dear uncle and casually survey the land. He entered with his own keys, whistling, already feeling like the owner of everything. But as he passed near the library, he stopped dead. The door was ajar. Kunle peered in with curiosity. What he saw chilled him to the bone. Chief Obinna, the man who had never dedicated more than 10 consecutive minutes to him without looking at his watch, was sitting in his favorite armchair, and at his feet, sitting on the rug surrounded by antique-bound books, was the househelp's daughter. "Look here, Amara," Chief Obinna was saying with unknown patience. "Compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe, according to Einstein. If you save this today, tomorrow it's worth double. So, is it better to save than to spend on sweets? Isn't that right, Uncle Obinna?" The girl replied, laughing, "Uncle Obinna." Kunle felt a pang of jealousy so sharp that he had to grip the doorframe. That dirty little girl called him uncle. To him, his blood nephew, Chief Obinna, barely grunted a greeting, and with that child, he melted like a loving grandfather. Kunle discreetly backed away before being seen. His mind, poisoned by greed, began to race. He walked towards the kitchen looking for water and crossed paths with Ngozi, who was scrubbing the floor on her knees. "Good afternoon, Uncle Kunle," she said humbly, lowering her gaze. He didn't even reply. He looked at her with disgust, as if she were a cockroach that had snuck into his future home. What are these two plotting? He thought. They're trying to sweet-talk the old man. Do they want to get into the will? The confirmation of his fears came a few minutes later. Kunle entered Chief Obinna's study, taking advantage of the fact that he was still in the library with the girl. He began to rummage through the papers on the desk, looking for anything, and he found it. It was a bank transfer receipt. Kunle read it, and his eyes almost popped out of his sockets. The Elite International Academy, annual tuition and monthly fees. Villian, beneficiary, Amara Santos. Kunle crumpled the paper in his fist, trembling with rage. His uncle was spending a fortune educating the cleaner's daughter at the city's most exclusive school. The same school attended by the children of senators and big businessmen. "This is it," Kunle hissed, his face disfigured by anger. "You're spending my inheritance, you stupid old man. You're throwing my money away on this rubbish." He realized the danger was real. If Chief Obinna continued to grow fond of the girl, he could change his will. He could leave them something, or worse, he could decide to leave everything to them and create a foundation or some philanthropic nonsense managed by that child genius in the future. Kunle put the paper in his pocket and left the study. He no longer felt like greeting his uncle. Now, he had a mission. He had to get them out of there. But he couldn't just ask Chief Obinna to fire them. It was clear the old man was under their spell. No, it had to be something definitive, something that would destroy Chief Obinna's trust forever, something that would touch the millionaire's most sensitive nerve, his paranoia that everyone was stealing from him. As he walked towards his sports car, Kunle looked towards the library window, where the silhouettes of the old man and the girl could be seen. "Enjoy your books while you can, little bookworm," he muttered with a cruel smile. "Because soon, you'll be back in the gutter you crawled out of, and your mother will go with you, dragging shame." The plan was already forming in his head. It would be dirty, it would be low, but it would be effective. Kunle was willing to do anything for his money, even destroy the life of an innocent child. The night Kunle chose to execute his plan was a stormy night. It seemed the sky itself knew the evil that was about to unfold under the roof of the Ngozi mansion and wept in advance. Kunle had insisted on organizing a small family dinner with his uncle. He said he wanted to celebrate a supposed new real estate deal, but the only celebration he had in mind was the downfall of Ngozi and her daughter. He arrived early with a rehearsed smile and a bottle of expensive wine under his arm. Chief Obinna, though naturally distrustful, was in a good mood. The past few weeks with Amara nearby, solving riddles and organizing his library, had brought back a spark of life he thought extinguished. For the first time in years, the mansion didn't feel like a marble tomb. Ngozi diligently served the table, moving silently like a helpful shadow. Amara was sitting on a high stool in the kitchen, finishing her school assignments, out of sight of the masters, as the rules dictated, although Chief Obinna already allowed her to be closer. "Uncle, go wash your hands." "I'll pour the wine," Kunle said with sickening sweetness. Chief Obinna nodded and headed to the guest bathroom. Before entering, he took off his watch, a heavy gold Rolex Oyster Perpetual, a collector's item valued at over 10 million. It was his most prized possession, the only memory he kept of his own father. He left it on the marble ledge of the hallway, a habit he had had for decades when he was at home. As soon as the bathroom door closed and the sound of the faucet was heard, Kunle acted. His eyes gleamed with malice. He approached the ledge, took the heavy gold watch, and slipped it into his pant pocket. His heart beat fast, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the harm he was about to cause. He walked stealthily towards the kitchen. Ngozi was in the dining room finishing setting the silverware. Amara was alone, concentrating on her notebook. "Hello, little one," Kunle said, with a falsely sweet voice that made Amara shiver. "Hello, Uncle Kunle," she replied politely, without looking up much. "Is that your backpack?" he asked, pointing to the old, mended pink backpack hanging from the back of an empty chair. "Yes, sir." "How nice," he said, and taking advantage of Amara turning to erase something in her notebook, Kunle passed by the chair. With a quick, magician-like movement, he took the watch from his pocket and dropped it into the mesh side pocket of the girl's backpack. The weight of the gold pulled the fabric down, but no one noticed. The crime was done, the trap was set. And before we see this bomb of injustice explode, I want to ask you something, my friend. If you feel that Kunle's wickedness offends you as much as it offends me, if you have ever seen an innocent person pay for others' guilt, subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the subscribe button and leave me a comment telling me from which city you are following this story. I want to know who the good-hearted people are accompanying us today. Your comment helps us a lot to keep creating. Let's return to dinner. Chief Obinna came out of the bathroom, and they sat down to eat. Dinner proceeded normally, although Kunle was restless, constantly looking towards the hallway and then at his uncle. He was waiting for the right moment. When Ngozi brought the coffee, Kunle cast the bait. "Uncle, what time is it, by the way? I don't see your watch on. You never take it off." Chief Obinna instinctively touched his wrist. The bare skin surprised him. Right. I left it in the hallway when I washed my hands. I'll go get it. I don't like to leave it lying around." Chief Obinna stood up calmly. He went to the hallway. Kunle mentally counted. 3, 2, 1, Ngozi. Chief Obinna's scream resonated throughout the house, making the crystal glasses tremble. It was not a scream of anger, it was a scream of panic. Ngozi ran out of the kitchen, pale. Amara timidly peered from behind the door. "Yes, sir? What's wrong?" "My watch. My father's watch. I left it here 20 minutes ago. It's not here." Chief Obinna was red, frantically searching the floor, moving the decorations. Someone took it. Kunle appeared in the doorway, acting surprised. "What do you mean it's not there, uncle? Are you sure?" "No one has entered or left the house. Except..." Kunle left the sentence, hanging in the air like a sword over Ngozi's head, his snake-like eyes fixed on the mother and daughter. "Except who?" Chief Obinna asked, breathing heavily. "Well, uncle," Kunle said, approaching and placing a hand on the old man's shoulder. "I didn't want to say anything, but you know what they say. A goat always returns to the mountains. You have strange people living here, people who need money." Ngozi instantly understood the accusation. She clasped her hands to her chest, horrified. "Chief Obinna, no. For God's sake, no. I would never touch anything of yours. I've been here for months. You know me." "You perhaps not, Ngozi," Kunle interrupted with soft venom. "But children see shiny things and can't resist, especially children who have nothing." Chief Obinna looked at Amara. The girl was paralyzed in the kitchen doorway, her large eyes filled with tears, feeling the weight of a guilt that was not hers. Doubt, that terrible seed Chief Obinna had tried to pluck from his heart, sprouted strongly again, fueled by his nephew's words. "Check their things, uncle," Kunle whispered. "If they have nothing to hide, they won't mind." The air in the room became unbreathable. The accusation was launched, and the innocence of a child was about to be violated in the cruelest way possible. The mansion's hallway became an improvised courtroom, cold and ruthless, where the presumption of innocence did not exist. Ngozi stood before Chief Obinna and Kunle, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Not from guilt, but from pure indignation and fear. Fear of losing everything because of a lie. Chief Obinna, Ngozi pleaded, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Look into my eyes. I have been taking care of your house, your clothes, your food, for months. Has a kobo ever gone missing? Has a silver spoon ever disappeared? By the memory of my late husband, I swear we have not touched that watch. Chief Obinna looked at Ngozi with an internal struggle visible on his face. He wanted to believe her. His heart, the one Amara had slowly thawed with her numbers and her smile, screamed that this woman was honest, but his mind, hardened by years of betrayals, whispered the poisonous doubt Kunle had planted. Necessity has the face of a heretic, uncle. Words are carried away by the wind, Ngozi. Kunle interrupted with violent abruptness. Here, what matters is proof, and if they have nothing to fear, they won't mind if we check that ridiculous backpack. Without waiting for an answer, and with an aggressiveness that made Amara gasp, Kunle advanced towards the chair where the girl's school backpack rested. No, Ngozi cried, trying to interpose herself. Don't touch my daughter's things. She is a child. Get out of the way. Kunle roared, pushing Ngozi aside with contempt. Chief Obinna took a step forward, uncomfortable with his nephew's violence. Kunle, enough with the roughness. If you're going to search, do it, but don't touch them. Kunle smiled smugly, grabbed the worn backpack by its straps, lifted it into the air, as if it were a hunting trophy or an infected garbage bag. Amara covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes wide with terror. Let's see what these little rats are hiding, Kunle said with a theatrical and cruel movement. He turned the backpack upside down and shook it vigorously over the hallway table. Out fell the notebooks with gray pages. Out fell the pencil case with the broken zipper. Out fell the chewed pencils and an apple wrapped in a paper napkin for the next day's recess. Amara's poverty and effort were exposed there, humble objects on the polished wood. And then the sound that broke Ngozi's heart was heard. Clank. A heavy, metallic, golden sound. Chief Obinna's Rolex Oyster Perpetual fell from among the math books and hit the table, spinning on itself until it stopped under the chandelier's light, shining with a silent and terrible accusation. The silence that followed was absolute, deadly. Ngozi felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Her breath caught. Amara looked at the watch with disbelief, as if it were a monster that had just magically appeared. Kunle let out a triumphant laugh, a dry, cruel laugh that echoed off the marble walls. I knew it, he shouted, pointing at the watch with an accusing finger. There it is. Look at it, uncle. Look at it with your own eyes. I told you they were thieves. Starving wretches who bite the hand that feeds them. Chief Obinna looked at the watch, his face paling. The disappointment that crossed his eyes was more painful for Ngozi than any physical blow. He looked like a man who had just seen his last hope in humanity die. No, she whispered in a thin voice, backing away. It wasn't me, Chief Obinna. It wasn't me. The numbers. I didn't. Shut up, you thieving brat, Kunle yelled, approaching her threateningly. I bet you were already thinking of selling it to buy yourself new sneakers, huh? What a shame. Using a child to steal. Ngozi fell to her knees in front of Chief Obinna. She no longer cared about pride. She wept inconsolably, grabbing the millionaire's trousers. Chief Obinna, it's a trap. Someone put it there. Amara would never do that. Kill me if you want. Call the police, but don't believe my daughter is a thief. Please, sir, please. Kunle looked at his uncle impatiently. Are you still going to listen to their lies, uncle? Throw them out. Throw them out right now, or I'll call the police to take them away in handcuffs. That's what these rats deserve. Chief Obinna was immobile, looking alternately at the gold watch, the tear-stained face of the kneeling mother, and finally, the terrified but clear eyes of the little girl who loved mathematics. The pain in the old man's chest was unbearable. Everything indicated they were guilty. The evidence was there, but something, a small, logical voice in his head, the same voice that had awakened with Amara's math problems, told him that the equation didn't add up. Kunle smiled, feeling victorious, but he didn't know he had made a miscalculation. He had underestimated not his uncle's heart, but his intelligence. The silence that followed the watch's fall was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Kunle breathed heavily, with a thinly veiled smile of triumph on his lips, awaiting his uncle's furious outburst. He expected Chief Obinna to grab Ngozi by the arm and throw her out into the rainy street. He expected screams, insults, the definitive end of that invasion of poverty into his future inheritance. But the outburst never came. Chief Obinna remained motionless, staring at the gold watch glistening on the dark wood of the table. His breathing gradually calmed, shifting from initial shock to a calculating coolness. His eyes, which seconds earlier reflected pain, now shone with the metallic glint of a mind processing data at dizzying speed. The millionaire slowly crouched down, not to pick up the watch, but to get down to Amara's level. The girl was trembling, her face soaked with tears and snot, terrified by the bad man's shouts. "Amara," Chief Obinna said softly but firmly, so differently from the tone Kunle expected that even the nephew took a confused step back. "Look at me." The girl looked up and nodded. "Wipe your tears. Tears blur our sight, and we need to see clearly. We're going to solve a math problem, you and I. Are you ready?" Ngozi stopped crying for a second, looking at her employer in disbelief. "A math problem now? Yes." "Yes, sir," Amara stammered, wiping her eyes with her sweater cuff. "Good. Listen to the data of the problem." Chief Obinna stood up and turned towards Kunle, fixing him with a gaze that made the nephew's skin crawl. "Variable A. The watch was on my wrist at 8:00 p.m. Variable B. I went to the bathroom at 8:05 p.m. and left it on the ledge. Variable C. You, Kunle, shouted that the watch was missing at 8:25 p.m. Chief Obinna began to walk around the table like a shark circling its prey. "We have a time window of 20 minutes. In those 20 minutes, variable D, which is Ngozi, was serving soup and did not leave the dining room. I saw her. Variable E, which is Amara, was sitting on that stool in the kitchen doing her homework." "That's a lie," Kunle interrupted nervously, sweating coldly. "She could have gotten up when we weren't looking." "They are fast, uncle. They're like rats." Chief Obinna raised a hand, commanding silence without needing to shout. "That's where your equation fails, Kunle, because you forgot about variable F." "Variable F? What the hell are you talking about, uncle? Stop playing games and kick them out." The watch was in her backpack. "It's definitive proof." Chief Obinna smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was a sad, disappointed smile. The smile of someone who confirms that their own blood is rotten. Variable F, dear nephew, is technology. Chief Obinna took his mobile phone from his jacket pocket. With a calm movement, he opened an application and projected the image onto the enormous television screen that presided over the living room, right behind where Kunle was standing. "Remember the day I left the 5 million on the table?" Chief Obinna asked. "That day I realized I needed to protect this house. Not from the employees, Kunle. They proved to be more honest than any partner I've ever had. I needed to protect it from the parasites." On the television screen appeared a crisp, high-definition 4K recording. It was the recording of the hallway from barely half an hour ago. Everyone looked at the screen. Chief Obinna was seen entering the bathroom, the watch was seen on the ledge, and then Kunle was seen on the giant screen. Kunle looked around with a guilty face. It was perfectly clear how he extended his hand, took the watch, and slipped it into his pocket. His malicious smile was visible. Then, the camera changed angle and showed the kitchen. Kunle was seen approaching Amara from behind, feigning kindness, and with a quick movement dropping the watch into the open backpack while the girl erased something in her notebook. The silence in the room broke, but this time it was from Ngozi's gasp of horror. "My God," the mother exclaimed, covering her mouth with her hands. "It was you! You put it there!" Amara looked at the screen with wide eyes. "The camera saw it!" the girl shouted, pointing at the TV. "The camera doesn't lie, just like numbers." Kunle was pale as a corpse. He backed up until he hit the wall. He had no escape. The evidence was irrefutable, projected on 60 inches for the world to see his baseness. "Uncle, I can explain," Kunle stammered, his voice turning into a high-pitched thread. "It was a joke. I just wanted to test them. I wanted to make sure they were trustworthy for you. I did it for you." Chief Obinna turned off the television with a dry click. The screen went black, but the truth was already illuminated. "Don't insult me anymore, Kunle," Chief Obinna said, his voice laden with infinite weariness. "You didn't do it for me. You did it out of greed. You saw that I was helping a brilliant child have a future, and you were afraid that your share of the cake would become smaller." Chief Obinna approached his nephew. Kunle, who had always felt superior because of his youth and strength, now looked like a frightened child facing the old man's moral authority. "You thought that because they were poor, their word was worth less than yours," Chief Obinna continued. "You thought that because I was old, I was stupid, but you forgot the most important thing Amara taught me, order, and you, Kunle, are chaos. You are the error in the account, and errors are corrected." Chief Obinna turned towards Ngozi and Amara. His posture changed, his shoulders relaxed. "Ngozi, Amara," he said, his voice breaking, "I ask for your forgiveness. I ask for your forgiveness for having allowed this trash to enter our home and humiliate you. I should never have doubted, not for a second." Kunle tried to speak again. He tried to appeal to blood, to family. "Uncle, please, I'm your nephew. You can't do this to me for some house helps." Chief Obinna looked at him with absolute contempt. "They are not house helps, Kunle. They are my family now. Because family is not the blood that runs in your veins. It is the loyalty that is demonstrated by actions. And you? You are nothing to me anymore." The millionaire pointed to the main door with a trembling but authoritative finger. "Get out and leave the car keys and house keys on the table. I don't want to see your face again as long as I live." Justice had arrived. And it had not arrived with violence, but with the crushing truth that only light can bring to darkness. Kunle, defeated, humiliated by his own wickedness, had to empty his pockets and leave in the storm, leaving behind the life of luxuries he thought he had secured, expelled by the honesty of a child and the firmness of an old man who had just awakened. The final slam of the door as Kunle left the mansion resonated like a cannon shot, marking the end of a war and the beginning of a peace the house had not known for decades. Outside, the storm roared fiercely, carrying with it the toxicity and greed of a man who had everything and lost it for not having a heart. Inside, the silence that remained was neither heavy nor cold. It was a clean silence, like the air after rain. Chief Obinna stood in the middle of the hallway, looking at the closed door. His shoulders, always rigid and haughty, slumped. Suddenly, he no longer looked like the formidable property magnate. He simply looked like an old man, tired and deeply ashamed. He turned slowly towards Ngozi and Amara. The mother was still embracing the child, protecting her from a danger that had already departed. Chief Obinna felt a lump in his throat seeing the fear that still lingered in their eyes. Fear that he, with his initial distrust, had helped to fuel. "Ngozi," Chief Obinna said, and his voice broke. He had to clear his throat to regain composure. "Please, get up from the floor." Ngozi stood up, smoothing her apron with trembling hands. "Chief Obinna, I will go tidy the kitchen and we will go to our room. I am very sorry for all this scandal." "No," Chief Obinna interrupted softly. "You won't be tidying anything today. And please, stop calling me sir with such fear." The millionaire walked to the nearest sofa and sank into it, covering his face with his hands for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes were moist. "I have to ask for your forgiveness, and not just for tonight. I have to ask for your forgiveness for the first day." Ngozi looked at him, confused. "The first day?" "The 5 million on the table," Chief Obinna confessed, looking at Amara. "It wasn't an accident. It was a test. I wanted you to fail. I wanted to prove to myself that all people are bad, that everyone wants to steal from me. I was so sick with bitterness that I used my money to try to corrupt a child's innocence." Amara, who had been listening attentively, gently detached herself from her mother's embrace and approached the old man. She placed her small hand on Chief Obinna's knee. The contact made the millionaire tremble. "But we didn't fail, Uncle Obinna," the girl said softly, and the formula was corrected. "My teacher says it doesn't matter if you make a mistake at the beginning of the problem. What matters is that the final result is correct." Chief Obinna smiled through tears and placed his large wrinkled hand over the girl's small one. "You're right, my little genius. The final result is what counts, and the result is that you two are the only true things I have in this life." Chief Obinna stood up with renewed energy, went to the dining room, where dinner had been interrupted, and began to remove Kunle's plates with a gesture of repugnance, throwing the used napkin into the trash. "Ngozi, sit at the table," he ordered, but this time it was a warm invitation. But sir, I am the employee. It's not appropriate." "As of today, the rules of this house change," Chief Obinna declared firmly. "You will continue working here, yes, because I know you are a proud woman who likes to earn her salary. But I will no longer dine alone at this immense table like a foolish king in his castle. We will dine together. And Amara," the millionaire looked at the girl, "you will have everything your mind needs. Books, tutors, the best universities. Kunle was right about one thing. I was spending his inheritance, and I intend to spend every last kobo of it, ensuring that you become the brilliant woman you are destined to be. Because you taught me that money saved rots, but money invested in goodness multiplies." That night, as the storm lashed against the windows, genuine laughter was heard in the Nwosu mansion's dining room for the first time in 20 years. There were no champagne toasts or fancy guests, just an old man, a mother, and a child eating warm soup, united by an invisible but indestructible bond. Chief Obinna looked around and understood something fundamental. Kunle had taken his sports car and his expensive suits, but he had left poor. He, Chief Obinna, was left without his gold watch on his wrist, but for the first time in his life, He felt immensely rich. The fall of the arrogant had given way to the rise of a new family. But the story does not end here, my friends, because the seed planted that night would take years to bear its most impressive fruit. And fate had reserved one last glorious surprise for Amara, the girl who counted banknotes with innocence. Time is the fairest architect of all. It places each brick in its proper place and demolishes what lacks solid foundations. 20 years have passed since that stormy night when a gold watch almost destroyed a life. Today, the Ngozi mansion is no longer a place of silence and shadows. Today it is the headquarters of the Chief Obinna Ngozi Foundation, an organization dedicated to providing scholarships to brilliant children from low-income backgrounds. And in the main office, sitting in the same leather chair where old Chief Obinna used to monitor his cameras with distrust, is Amara. Amara is no longer the girl with braids and worn shoes. She is a young woman, elegant and powerful, graduated with honors in economics from one of the best universities in the world. But if you look closely, you can still see in her eyes that spark of curiosity that seeks to bring order to chaos. Chief Obinna passed away 3 years ago, peacefully in his bed, holding the hand of the daughter life had given him. He did not die alone and bitter as he feared. He left surrounded by love. Knowing that his legacy was in the cleanest and most capable hands imaginable, he left everything in Amara's name. There were no disputes, because Kunle, consumed by his own debts and vices, never dared to return. Ngozi, her hair now silver, and her back a little more tired, no longer cleans floors. She is the foundation's director of welfare and ensures that no family lacks a plate of food. She lives with the dignity of a queen mother, seeing how her daughter, the one for whom she cried and pleaded, now leads an empire with justice and kindness. On Amara's desk, in a silver frame, there are no ostentatious diplomas. There is an old-school notebook with gray pages and a mended cover, open to a page where childish handwriting reads, "Final sum, 5 million exact." It is her daily reminder, a reminder that true wealth is not in the bank account, but in the values we carry within. Amara learned that money can buy a house, but not a home. It can buy a watch, but not time, and it can buy company, but never loyalty. She showed the world that honesty is not a weakness of the poor, but humanity's greatest strength. That when you do what is right, even when no one sees you, or when you think no one sees you, life takes care of returning that integrity, multiplied by 1,000. And so we close this story, my dear friend. A story that began with a trap and ended with a lesson in love. I hope this tale has touched your heart as much as it has touched mine. If so, I lovingly invite you to subscribe to our channel right now. Your likes and subscriptions are the engine that drives us to continue searching for and telling these stories that inspire us to be better. Leave me a comment. What would you do if you found that amount of money? Do you think honesty is still the best path in these times? Thank you for staying with me until the end. I am your narrator and friend, and I await you in the next video that is already appearing on your screen with another story that will move you to tears. Until next time, and may God bless you.